The wind screamed across Observation Post 7 like a living thing, carrying snow so thick it erased the world beyond 50 meters. Corporal Sara Vance stood alone in the freezing timber tower, her breath clouding white in the subzero air, watching nothing but an endless white void that swallowed sound, sight, and hope. The radio crackled with static and distant voices. Then Sergeant Kohler's voice cut through, flat and dismissive. OP7, maintain watch. Nothing's happening on your end. Sarah's jaw tightened. The wind howled at 15 knots, gusting higher, driving ice crystals against the tower's wooden walls with the sound of thrown sand. She shifted her weight, feeling the cold seeping through 3 layers of clothing, and checked her M24 sniper rifle one more time. Bolt smooth, chamber clean. Scope clear. A single thought pulsed beneath her calm exterior. They don't even remember. I'm out here. Then she heard it. A metallic clink, faint and foreign, barely audible over the wind's fury. Her hand moved to the radio handset before conscious thought caught up. She keyed the mic. Actual, I'm hearing movement. East approach, approximately. Vance. Kohler's voice snapped back immediately, irritation bleeding through. Stay off comms unless it's confirmed contact. West sector is hot. Keep the net clear. She lowered the handset slowly, feeling the texture of the plastic grip against her gloved palm. Her jaw worked once, teeth clenched behind closed lips. Then she turned back to the white void and brought her rifle scope to her eye. There. Shadow movement at 600 meters, near the boulder cluster she'd memorized 3 weeks ago. Shapes that didn't belong in the storm. Movement with purpose and discipline. Nobody believed the enemy would flank through a blizzard like this. Nobody believed a forgotten guard post on the eastern edge mattered. And somewhere beneath the cold professional calm that kept her breathing steady and her hands sure, Sara Vance knew one more truth. Nobody believed she mattered. But in less than a minute, that was going to change forever. Real stories. Real courage. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss a moment from Hidden Sniper Stories. And drop a comment. Where are you watching from right now? Sara Vance was 27 years old when they sent her to the post everyone had forgotten. Army infantry, sniper qualified, graduated in the top 15% of her class at Fort Benning. 2 combat deployments under her belt, 16 months total downrange, and a service record that would have impressed anyone who bothered to read it. Nobody bothered. She was lean in the way soldiers get after years of carrying heavy loads over long distances. Her hands were weathered, knuckles scarred from work and weather. A faint scar carved a thin line above her left eyebrow. Shrapnel from a mortar round that had landed too close on her first deployment. She moved with economy, spoke when spoken to, and kept her head down in a way that made her easy to overlook. That was part of it. She didn't self-promote, didn't push for recognition, didn't play the politics that got soldiers noticed. In a male-dominated military occupational specialty, being quiet and female meant being invisible. Her soft-spoken manner was mistaken for lack of confidence by people who'd never seen her work. The memory came without warning, the way they always did. Last deployment, 8 months ago. Patrol moving through a narrow valley, everyone focused on the ridgeline to the north, where intelligence said the threat would come. Sarah had seen something nobody else caught. Shadow movement in a compound window to the south, pattern wrong for civilians, spacing disciplined. She'd called it. The patrol leader had hesitated, then changed the route. 3 fighting-age males with AK-47s melted away before contact could be made. The ambush never happened. 14 soldiers went home because Sara Vance had seen what others missed. The patrol leader got a handshake from the company commander. Sarah got a nod and a good eyes Vance from the squad leader. She'd learned early, do the work, don't expect recognition. The mission matters more than who gets credit. But it still cut. just a little. Every single time. Her current assignment to OP-7 had happened with stunning casualness. Lieutenant Brennan had barely glanced at her personnel file during the platoon briefing. Just scanned the roster, saw her name, and made the call. Vance, you're on Eastern observation. 12-hour rotations. Standard watch protocol. No mention of her sniper qualification. No acknowledgement of her 2 combat tours or expert marksman badge. Just another body filling a checkbox position on the duty roster. She'd saluted, said, "Yes, sir," and walked out of the briefing room with the assignment nobody wanted. OP-7 was considered the sleeper post. The joke position. The place where nothing ever happened and nothing ever would. Previous guards had brought paperback novels, decks of cards, contraband energy drinks. Some had slept through entire shifts. Command focused 90% of their defensive resources on the western approach, where intelligence analysis and terrain features both said the enemy attack would come, if it came at all. Private Dalton, a 19-year-old supply runner with more enthusiasm than sense, had actually laughed when he heard her assignment. Eastern Watch? Man, lucky you. Bring a pillow. Bring 2. Even Sergeant Morrison, 3rd squad leader and a genuinely experienced NCO who'd been downrange 4 times, had given her a sympathetic look. Just call if you see anything, Vance. You won't, but just in case. Sarah had nodded, taken the assignment, and said nothing. Then she'd started working. 3 weeks of invisible preparation. Range cards calculated and hand-drawn to 1,200 meters. Wind tables compiled for every temperature range the forecast predicted. Zeroing her M24 in different conditions. Dawn cold, midday warmth, dusk chill. Memorizing terrain features until she could close her eyes and see them. Boulder cluster at 600 meters. Lightning-struck dead tree at 900. Stone foundation remnants at 1,100. She hand-loaded precision rounds in her tent at night, testing cold-weather ballistics that most infantry soldiers never bothered with. Built an improved firing position with sandbags she'd carried up herself, one at a time. Cleared sight lines, reinforced the tower's support beams, created a windbreak that didn't interfere with her fields of fire. Nobody noticed because nobody visited OP-7. She was alone with the work, and the work was enough. Almost. They don't have to believe in me, she told herself during the long watches, breath fogging in the cold. The work doesn't need an audience. But underneath the professional calm, there was a crack. Small, carefully controlled, but there. The wound of being dismissed over and over, of having competence overlooked because it came in a package people didn't expect. She'd learned to carry it the way she carried everything else. Quietly, without complaint, focused on the mission. Her father's voice came to her sometimes in the silent hours. Vietnam veteran, tunnel rat, deceased now for 6 years. She could still hear the rasp in his voice from the Agent Orange that had finally killed him. Do it right even when nobody's watching, Sarah girl. Especially then. That's when it matters most. She'd believed him then. She believed him now. Even when it hurt. Sarah checked her watch. 03:45. 4 hours into her shift. The blizzard was building, visibility dropping, temperature falling past -10 degrees. Everyone else was focused on the western sector, where the radios crackled with activity and tension. And she was here, alone on the forgotten flank, doing work nobody believed mattered. She pulled the bolt back on her rifle, checked the chamber one more time, and settled into her position. The wind howled, the snow fell. The void watched back. Somewhere out there in the white darkness, something was coming. She could feel it in her bones, in the silence beneath the storm, in the way the air tasted wrong. Nobody believed her. But that had never stopped her before. The blizzard had been forecast 3 days out. A massive Arctic front pushing down from Canada, bringing wind, snow, and temperatures that would make combat operations nearly impossible. Command had called the briefing 48 hours before it hit. Every squad leader and platoon commander packed into the operations tent, while Captain Reeves stood before a topographical map marked with red thread indicators. Enemy activity expected West Sector, Reeves had said, pointer tapping the map with sharp precision. All maneuver elements focus there. 1st Platoon reinforces the main line. 3rd Squad supplements. 2nd Platoon's defensive position. Mortars on standby, direct fire support authorized. Lieutenant Chen's platoon got extra machine guns, additional ammunition, thermal optics for the worst visibility. The western approach became a fortress of overlapping fields of fire, pre-registered mortar coordinates, and layered defensive positions. Resources flowed west like water finding its level. OP-7 got nothing. Standard watch rotation, no reinforcement. No special equipment. Just another name on the duty roster that nobody read twice. Sara had bundled into cold-weather gear layers of polypropylene, fleece, Gore-Tex shell, and climbed the tower alone while the first snow started falling. The ladder rungs were already slick with ice. Her breath came in white clouds. Nobody walked her to the post. Nobody checked if she had what she needed. She had everything she needed. She'd made sure of it weeks ago. The storm hit in full force just after midnight. By 0400 hours, visibility had dropped to near zero. The world reduced to swirling white chaos and wind that shook the tower's timber frame. Sara stood at her position, scanning through breaks in the snow, and noticed something wrong. Radio interference. Static that pulsed in patterns, rhythmic and artificial. She'd heard it before on her last deployment. Enemy communications jamming, designed to disrupt coordination during an assault. She keyed her handset. OP-7 to actual. I'm getting unusual radio interference. Possible enemy jamming, pattern suggests. Atmospheric conditions, Vance. Sergeant Kohler's voice came back immediately, bored and certain. Log it in your watch report and continue observation. Sara's finger hovered over the transmit button. Then she released it. Copy. 2 hours later, at 0600, she noticed the silence. Normally, even in a storm, you could hear wildlife. Birds sheltering in the trees, foxes moving through the snow. The small sounds of a living landscape. Now there was nothing but wind and the creak of frozen wood. Animals went quiet when predators came close. She called it in. OP-7. Wildlife silence, all sectors. Possible movement indicators. The response came back clipped, distracted. Copy. Maintain posture. At 0730, Sara heard metallic sounds carried on the wind. The distinct clink of equipment striking equipment. Rifles against load-bearing vests, metal buckles, magazine pouches. Sounds that didn't belong in an empty wilderness during a blizzard. She keyed the radio, heart rate climbing despite her training. OP-7 to actual. I'm hearing metallic sounds, bearing 075, possibly weapons or equipment. Vance. Kohler's voice had an edge now, irritation breaking through. Unless you have visual confirmation of enemy combatants, stay off the net. West Sector is engaging. Keep this frequency clear. The words hit like a slap. Sara lowered the handset and stood perfectly still, feeling the weight of dismissal settle over her like the falling snow. Then the Western Sector erupted. Gunfire crackled through the radio, overlapping voices shouting contact reports and ammunition counts. Explosions thumped in the distance, felt more than heard through the storm. Every available unit began moving west. 3rd Squad, 2nd Squad, the quick reaction force. Radio traffic became chaos, call signs and coordinates, and desperate requests for fire support. Sara stood alone on the eastern flank, listening to her entire unit rush toward the fight everyone expected, while sounds in the white void grew closer. Disciplined sounds, professional sounds. The sounds of soldiers who knew exactly what they were doing. She brought the radio to her lips one more time. OP, 7 to actual. I have movement indicators, bearing 075, estimated 800 meters, possible squad-sized element. OP7, this is actual. Captain Reeves himself, voice hard and final. Unless you have confirmed enemy contact, do not clog this net. Clear this frequency immediately. The radio went silent. Sara lowered the handset and realized her hands were shaking, not from the cold. From something deeper: frustration, fear, the terrible knowledge that she was right, and nobody would listen. They won't believe me, she thought, staring into the white nothing. Even if I scream it, they won't believe me. The memory came without permission. Last deployment, Route Tampa, riding in the back of an MRAP. She'd spotted a pattern in the dirt on the roadside: disturbed earth, 2 uniform, recent digging, classic IED indicators. She'd called it to the vehicle commander, a staff sergeant with 3 deployments. You're overreacting, Vance. Intel says this route is clear. They'd driven past. 2 days later, a different patrol hit the IED she'd identified. 3 soldiers wounded, 1 lost his leg below the knee. The EOD team confirmed the device had been there when Sara's convoy passed. She'd been right. And 3 men paid the price for nobody listening. The guilt of that moment lived in her chest like shrapnel. Sharp, permanent, impossible to remove. And now, it was happening again. The same pattern. The same dismissal. The same certain knowledge that people would die because she didn't matter enough to be heard. Sara stood in the freezing tower, radio silent in her hand, and made a decision. She stopped calling. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency. Bolt back, chamber check, magazine seated, safety off. She brought the scope to her eye and began scanning with methodical precision, using the range card she'd memorized, compensating for wind and snow and the distortion of visibility through the storm. If they wouldn't hear her words, they would see her work. The shapes materialized at 600 meters, exactly where she'd predicted, moving with discipline and spacing. Not a probe, not a lost patrol. A deliberate flanking assault while everyone looked west. Sara's breathing slowed. Her heart rate dropped. Training took over, the countless hours on the range, the muscle memory of 1,000 repetitions, the cold professional focus that turned fear into fuel. She laid her crosshairs on the point man and began calculating wind, distance, and the trajectory of what came next. What would you have done in that moment? When the world tells you you're wrong, but every instinct screams you're right, do you keep shouting into the void, or do you act? Sara Vance chose action. The void was about to answer back. Sara's breathing changed without conscious thought. The rhythm slowed, deepened, became the controlled cadence taught in sniper school and perfected over years of live fire. In through the nose, 4 counts. Hold. Out through barely parted lips, 6 counts. Her body temperature seemed to drop with each exhale, the cold exterior matching the cold focus interior. She could feel her heartbeat slowing. 52 beats per minute. 48. 42. The pulse in her fingertips faded to almost nothing. This was the zone, the place where time stretched and the world narrowed to breath, heartbeat, and the geometry of a single shot. Muscle memory took over completely. Cheek weld against the stock firm but not pressed, consistent pressure point she'd trained 10,000 times. Natural point of aim, her body aligned so the rifle pointed at target with 0 muscular tension. Trigger finger resting gently on the curve of metal, pad of her finger centered, ready for the smooth straight back press that would break the shot. Her left hand gripped the stock with calluses in specific places, thick ridges of hardened skin along her palm and the base of her thumb. Not the standard infantry calluses from carrying a rifle on patrol. These were different. The marks of a professional marksman who'd spent hundreds of hours in exactly this position. An image flashed graduation day at sniper school, standing on a sun-baked range at Fort Benning, holding a wooden plaque for highest qualification score in her class. The instructor's voice echoed across time. "Vance, you don't just shoot well, you think like the bullet. You see the path before it exists." Another flash, sharper. Previous deployment, Valley engagement, enemy machine gunner setting up a PKM on a ridgeline 680 meters distant. She'd made the call, taken the shot, watched through her scope as the threat disappeared. An entire patrol lived because of that single trigger press. No fanfare, no celebration. Just another day downrange. Sara pulled out her handwritten range card, a piece of laminated paper covered in her precise handwriting. Every distance calculated and confirmed. Wind drift noted for different speeds and directions. Temperature adjustments. Elevation changes. The product of 3 weeks of invisible work that nobody knew existed. She adjusted her scope with practiced clicks. 3 MOA left for wind compensation. 1.5 MOA up for cold air density. The frigid temperature made the air heavier, changed how the bullet flew. Most soldiers never learned this. She'd made it second nature. From her chest pouch, she pulled a custom hand-loaded round. 168 grain Sierra Match King, loaded to her exact specifications, tested and proven in conditions exactly like these. She slid it into the chamber with a smooth metallic whisper and closed the bolt. Her lips moved, words barely audible even to herself. Wind 15 knots, gusting east. Temp -12. Adjust 2.2 mils. This was not a standard infantry soldier. This was something else entirely. Through her scope, the enemy materialized like ghosts taking shape. First visual confirmed at 600 meters, shadows moving through the boulder cluster with professional precision, disciplined spacing, tactical bounds covering movements. These weren't militia or hastily trained insurgents. These were soldiers. Sara counted them as they advanced. Fire team. Squad. More shapes behind the first element. Her breath caught despite her training. Platoon strength element. 30 to 40 combatants, moving with coordination and purpose through conditions that should have made movement impossible. This wasn't a probe. This wasn't a feint or a recon element testing defenses. This was the main assault. The actual attack. And everyone was looking west at the diversion, exactly as the enemy had planned. The real attack was here, right in front of her. And she was the only one who knew. Sara's crosshairs settled on the point man, a figure moving through the snow with the confidence of someone who thought they were unseen. Range, 620 meters. Wind from the northeast, gusting. Cold affecting ballistics. She made the final calculations in her head, numbers flowing like water, years of training condensing into pure instinct. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Smooth pressure, straight back, no jerk. The rifle cracked, stock punching her shoulder with familiar force. Through the scope, she watched the point man drop. Clean. Instant. One moment moving forward, the next collapsing into the snow without a sound that carried beyond the howling wind. The enemy element halted. Confused. In the chaos of the western firefight and the screaming blizzard, nobody had heard her shot. They clustered around their fallen comrade, checking for vitals, scanning the white void for threats they couldn't identify. Sara watched them through her scope, already loading the next round. She could see the body language, confusion, uncertainty. They thought it was an accident, cold-related casualty maybe. Heart failure from the extreme conditions. Bad luck. Not enemy contact. Not a sniper. After 30 seconds, they resumed movement. Cautious now, but still advancing. Still committed to the assault. Still believing they were unseen. Sarah's breathing remained perfectly steady. Her heart rate stayed low. The scope tracked to the next target, a team leader coordinating movement with hand signals. She began her breathing cycle again. The world narrowed. The wind howled. And in the forgotten tower on the eastern flank, a soldier nobody believed in prepared to prove exactly how wrong they were. One shot at a time. The second shot came 90 seconds later. The team leader had moved forward to check the point man, exposing himself at 580 meters. Sarah's crosshairs found center mass. The rifle cracked. The team leader dropped without a sound, swallowed by snow and distance. Third shot, radio operator, identifiable by the antenna protruding from his pack. He was calling in the casualties, trying to establish what was happening. Range, 610 meters. Wind gusting harder now. Sarah compensated, exhaled, fired. The operator went down mid-transmission. Their communications net went silent. Fourth shot, machine gunner setting up a PKM on a low rise, trying to establish a support by fire position. She could see him adjusting the bipod legs, settling behind the weapon. 590 meters. She put the round through his upper chest before he could chamber the first belt. Each shot was calculated with mathematical precision. Patient. Invisible in the chaos of storm and the distant western firefight. Sarah worked the bolt, loaded, aimed, breathed, fired. A rhythm as natural as her heartbeat. The enemy reaction changed. Confusion transformed into something sharper. Panic edged with professional fear. They were taking precision fire from an unknown position, losing soldiers to an invisible threat. The blizzard made acquisition impossible. Her elevation gave her clear lines of sight they couldn't match. The flash suppressor on her M24 meant no muzzle flash in the white void. They couldn't see her. Couldn't find her. Couldn't fight back. The assault slowed dramatically. Soldiers who'd been advancing with purpose now went defensive, scrambling for cover behind rocks and dead timber. Command and control was breaking down. Without their radio operator, without their team leaders, they were isolated elements trying to survive rather than a coordinated attack. 3 kilometers west, 3rd Squad was repositioning when Sergeant Morrison caught movement through a gap in the snow. He raised his binoculars, adjusting focus, and his breath stopped. Enemy soldiers, dozens of them. Eastern approach. And they were taking fire. Morrison keyed his radio, voice tight with shock. Actual, this is 3rd Squad. We have enemy platoon strength, eastern approach. They're already engaged. Someone's engaging them. Captain Reeves's voice came back immediately, confusion bleeding through. Say again, 3rd Squad. Eastern approach? Engaged by who? Morrison watched another enemy soldier drop through his binoculars, the shot precise and professional. Someone shredding them, sir. Precision fire. Long range. I think it's OP7. The radio went silent for 3 full seconds. When Reeves spoke again, his voice was different. Uncertain. OP7? That's just Vance. In the operations tent, Lieutenant Brennan heard the radio traffic and felt ice water flood his stomach. He turned to the filing cabinet, hands suddenly clumsy, and pulled Sara Vance's personnel file. The folder he barely glanced at when making duty assignments. He opened it and started reading. Sniper School graduate, distinguished honor graduate. Expert marksman qualification. 2 combat tours, 16 months downrange. 14 confirmed engagements. Recommended for Scout Sniper Platoon by previous platoon commander. Skills: long-range precision fire, reconnaissance, forward observation. Brennan's face went pale. His hands shook slightly as he held the file. "I put a senior sniper on guard duty," he whispered to the empty tent. "I put one of the best shots in the company on the one position I thought didn't matter." 3 kilometers east, Sara knew none of this. Didn't know command was finally paying attention. Didn't know her personnel file was being read with dawning horror. Didn't know Sergeant Morrison was watching her work through binoculars with something close to awe. She was focused entirely on the geometry of death. Wind speed, temperature, range, the flex of her trigger finger, the rise and fall of her breathing. The enemy tried to advance. She dropped another soldier at 630 meters. They tried to flank left through a draw. She shifted fire and put a round through the flanking element, leader's chest at 540 meters. They attempted to establish a base of fire. She eliminated the machine gunner before he could fire a single round. Alone in the blizzard, invisible and dismissed, Sara Vance was holding an entire approach against a platoon-strength assault. Private Dalton arrived with 2nd Squad reinforcements, breathing hard from the sprint across open ground. He raised his binoculars toward OP7, trying to see what was happening, and caught Sara in the middle of a shot sequence. She was completely still, except for the slight movement of her finger. The rifle cracked. 700 meters downrange, an enemy soldier fell. Clean, professional, inevitable. Dalton's whisper was almost reverent. "Jesus Christ, she's not guarding. She's hunting." In the tower, Sara felt the weight of her ammunition pouch. Light. Too light. She did a quick mental count. 6 rounds left. Maybe 7 if she'd miscounted earlier. The enemy was regrouping for a final push. She could see it in their movements, the way they were consolidating behind cover, pulling back the scattered elements. And she could see their commander now. A figure moving among the soldiers with authority, using hand signals to coordinate, rallying them despite the losses. Professional soldier. Experienced. Dangerous. The kind of leader who could pull victory from chaos if given the chance. Range, 420 meters. Close enough to see details through her scope. The way he moved, the confidence in his gestures, the discipline in how the other soldiers responded to him. Kill him, and the assault collapses completely. Miss him, and he might still pull it off. The conditions were impossible. 15-knot wind, gusting to 20. Heavy snow reducing visibility to broken glimpses. Extreme cold affecting ballistics in ways that required calculations she'd have to do in her head. And the shot angle was bad partial concealment behind a boulder, narrow window of exposure. Sara checked her remaining ammunition. 5 standard rounds. 1 premium hand load, her personal best, assembled with precision on a quiet night 3 weeks ago. 168 grain Sierra Match King, powder charge measured to the kernel, brass prepped and annealed, primer seated with perfect tension. The best round she'd ever made, saved for a moment exactly like this. She loaded it into the chamber and felt the smooth click of the bolt closing. Through her scope, the enemy commander was still moving, coordinating, preparing the final assault that would break through if she didn't stop it. 420 meters. Impossible wind. Blizzard conditions. 1 shot. 1 chance. Sara settled into her position and began her breathing cycle. The world narrowed to crosshairs and calculations and the steady rhythm of her slowing heart. This was the shot that would define everything. Sara loaded the final match-grade round with hands that didn't shake despite everything riding on the next 10 seconds. She recalculated from scratch. Wind speed had increased to 18 knots, gusts coming hard from the northeast now. Temperature had dropped another 3 degrees since her last shot. Every variable mattered. Every fraction of error meant failure. She dialed her scope with deliberate clicks. 4.1 mils elevation. 3.8 mils windage. The math was perfect, or it was nothing. Through the scope, the enemy commander continued gesturing to his soldiers, rallying them for one final coordinated push. Sara could see the determination in his movements. He was good. Given another 2 minutes, he'd have them reorganized and attacking with purpose. She didn't have 2 minutes to give him. Sara breathed out slowly, feeling the cold air leave her lungs in a controlled stream. Her heartbeat dropped to 40 beats per minute. The world contracted to the small circle of her scope and the distant figure 420 meters away. Her finger applied pressure to the trigger. Smooth. Steady. Straight back. 3.5 pounds of pressure. 3.8. 4.0. The rifle cracked. Time stretched. Bullet flight time, 9/10 of a second. Sara watched through her scope as the commander continued his gesture, arm raised, completely unaware. The bullet arced through falling snow, wind pushing it, gravity pulling it, the cold air resisting its passage. It struck center mass with surgical precision. The commander dropped instantly, collapsing mid-gesture as if strings had been cut. He fell into the snow and didn't move. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then, the enemy assault shattered like glass hitting concrete. Leaderless, confused, under sustained precision fire from a threat they couldn't identify or engage, the remaining soldiers broke. Some tried to help the fallen commander. Others scrambled for deeper cover. The coordinated attack dissolved into survival instinct. They began withdrawing, controlled at first, professional discipline holding even in chaos, but withdrawing nonetheless. The mission had failed. The flank held. Sara worked the bolt, ejecting the spent casing, and began loading another round from muscle memory before she realized the shooting was over. Her hands stopped. She lowered the rifle and allowed herself one long breath. 15 minutes later, Captain Reeves climbed the ladder to OP7 personally. His boots hit the platform and he stopped, taking in the scene with the slow comprehension of someone realizing they'd been catastrophically wrong. Sara stood at her firing position, calm and methodical, reloading her rifle with the same care she'd shown before the fight started. 23 spent brass casings littered the wooden floor, each one marking a shot taken, a life ended, a threat eliminated. Her handwritten range card lay on the sandbags covered in pencil marks and calculations. She sensed movement and turned. Saw her company commander standing there. Came to attention and saluted. "Sector secure, sir." Reeves just stared. Really looked at her for the first time. The weathered hands that showed years of hard use. The steady eyes that held no anger or triumph. Just professional competence, earned through invisible work. The complete absence of uncertainty in her posture. "Corporal Vance?" His voice failed him. "We didn't." Sara nodded once, understanding what he couldn't say. "I know, sir." Boots on the ladder announced more arrivals. Sergeant Morrison pulled himself onto the platform, third squad behind him. The experienced NCO's face showed something Sara had never seen directed at her before, genuine respect mixed with something close to wonder. Morrison extended his hand. "That was the finest shooting I've ever seen, Corporal. In 20 years of service, the finest." Sara shook his hand, her grip firm but brief. "Thank you, Sergeant." Lieutenant Brennan appeared last, climbing slowly, his face pale. When he reached the platform, he couldn't meet her eyes. "I'm sorry, Vance. I should have read your file, should have known what you were capable of." Sara's voice remained quiet, without edge or bitterness. "It's done, sir." The line held. That's what matters. But in her chest, something old and wounded began, very slowly, to heal. Not because of the apologies. Not because they finally saw her. Because the work had been enough. The work had spoken louder than any word she could have said. And in the end, the work had saved them all. Word spread through the unit, with the speed that only combat truth carries. No official announcements needed. Soldiers talked, radios crackled, and within an hour, every man in the company knew what had happened on the eastern flank. The guard post everyone had dismissed. The soldier nobody had believed. The mockery died instantly, replaced by something heavier. Silence thick with recognition and shame. Private Dalton found Sara 2 hours later as she was cleaning her rifle in the tower. He climbed the ladder slowly, like a man approaching something he didn't deserve to approach. When he reached the platform, he stood there awkwardly, 19 years old, and suddenly feeling much younger. "Corporal," his voice cracked slightly. "I'm sorry for what I said. About the pillow. About it being easy duty. I didn't." Sara looked up from her cleaning rod, her expression neutral but not unkind. "You didn't know, Dalton." "Neither did I, until it mattered. Still, I was wrong. Way wrong." He hesitated, then added quietly, "Thank you for what you did." She nodded once. Dalton climbed back down the ladder, moving like someone who just learned an important lesson about assumptions. Captain Reeves returned to OP7 at 1600 hours with Lieutenant Brennan and the first sergeant. The captain's jaw was set in a way that Sara recognized. A decision made, consequences accepted. "Corporal Vance, I'm recommending you for the Bronze Star for valor. Your actions today saved this defensive line, and likely prevented a complete sector collapse." He paused, then continued with the tone of someone offering something valuable. "I'm also offering you an immediate transfer to Scout Platoon. Elite assignment. You belong with the best soldiers in this battalion, and I'm making it happen." The silence stretched. Everyone waited for the obvious acceptance. Sara surprised them all. "Sir, I'd like to stay on OP7. Reeves blinked. Brennan's mouth opened slightly. The first sergeant looked genuinely confused. "I appreciate the offer, sir," Sara continued, her voice calm and certain. "But I know this ground now. I know what it can do. I know how this approach works, where the dead zones are, how the wind moves through this valley." She gestured to the eastern approach, still visible through clearing snow. "Someone needs to take this position seriously. I'd like that someone to be me." Reeves studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly, understanding something deeper than tactics. "Then we make it permanent. 2-person post. Reinforced position with improved shelter and equipment. Direct fire support authority. You call it, we deliver it. No questions asked." "Thank you, sir." "No, Corporal." Reeves met her eyes. "Thank you." The respect that followed wasn't loud. No applause. No cheering. No dramatic ceremonies. Just quiet professional acknowledgement that ran deeper than any fanfare could reach. Soldiers who passed Sara now saluted first, regardless of rank. A small thing, but she noticed. The posture changed, shoulders straightened, eyes met hers instead of sliding away. Sergeant Morrison included her in the evening tactical planning session, pulling her aside to ask about sightlines and approach routes she'd observed. He listened when she spoke, took notes, adjusted defensive positions based on her input. Lieutenant Chen, commander of the Western Platoon, sought her out the next morning. "Vance, I'm repositioning my left flank. Would you take a look at my fields of fire? Make sure I'm not missing something." She did. Found 2 gaps in his coverage. He thanked her and fixed them immediately. This was the respect of professionals. Earned through action, proven through results, given without reservation once demonstrated. The kind of respect that mattered because it was real. Sara felt something shift inside her as the days passed. The old wound of being overlooked, dismissed, underestimated, forgotten was still there. Scars like that didn't vanish overnight, but alongside it grew something new. Proof. Undeniable, witnessed, permanent proof that she had been right all along. She didn't gloat. Never mentioned the dismissals or the ignored radio calls. Didn't lecture anyone about assumptions or institutional blindness. That wasn't who she was, and the work didn't need her defense. The work had defended itself. Late one evening, alone in the upgraded OP-7 with her new watch partner sleeping in the improved shelter below, Sara cleaned her rifle and thought about her father. Vietnam vet, tunnel rat. Dead 6 years now, but still teaching her lessons. You were right, Dad, she thought, running the cleaning rod through the barrel with practice strokes. Do it right even when nobody's watching. The work speaks louder than any voice ever could. Outside, snow fell gently now, the blizzard passed, the approach quiet under fresh white cover. Her radio sat within reach, the frequency clear, command actually listening when she called now. 23 enemy soldiers had learned the hard way that quiet didn't mean weak. That overlooked didn't mean incompetent. That the most dangerous person on a battlefield was often the one nobody bothered to see until it was far too late. Sara reassembled her rifle, loaded a fresh magazine, and settled into her watch. The eastern flank was hers now. Permanently. Officially. Respectfully. And God help anyone who thought that didn't matter. Sara returned to OP-7 3 days after the battle, and everything had changed. The tower had been reinforced with proper weather protection and improved firing positions. A second guard rotation was permanently assigned. Corporal Martinez from 3rd Squad, a steady soldier who treated the post with the seriousness it deserved. Direct communication lines to command had been installed, no longer routed through intermediaries who might dismiss what they heard. The eastern approach was taken seriously now. Patrols swept it daily. Observation was constant. The field phone that had sat silent for weeks now rang regularly with coordination requests, intelligence updates, and tactical questions from officers who actually wanted her input. The culture shifted across the entire defensive line. Captain Reeves ordered a complete reassessment of all positions previously considered low priority. Guard posts that had been treated as punishment details were suddenly manned by qualified soldiers with proper equipment and clear authority. Lieutenant Brennan changed his assignment protocols entirely. Every personnel file was read in full now. Skills matched to positions with actual thought and care. He carried the weight of his mistake visibly, shoulders a little heavier, decisions a little slower and more deliberate. Captain Reeves instituted a new command rule, posted in the operations tent where everyone could see it. No assumption goes unchallenged. Verify. Assess. Listen. 4 weeks after the blizzard, Sara stood alone in the tower during the quiet hour before dawn. The storm had long passed, leaving the world clean and white and still. She went through her morning routine with the same methodical precision she'd always used. Cleaned her rifle, checked her range card, scanned the horizon through her scope. The radio crackled to life. Captain Reeves's voice, calm and respectful. OP-7, this is actual. Status report? Sara keyed the handset, her voice steady. All clear, sir. Watching. There was a brief pause, and when Reeves spoke again, there was something in his tone beyond protocol. Understanding, maybe. Recognition of what those words really meant. We know you are, Corporal. We know. Sara set the handset down and returned to her scope, scanning the eastern approach with the same care she'd given it when nobody believed it mattered. Because it had always mattered. The world had simply needed proof before it could see the truth. Sara Vance didn't save the defensive line because anyone believed in her. She saved it because she believed in the work itself, believed in preparation, precision, and the quiet dignity of doing things right even when no one was watching. While others chased recognition and positioned themselves for notice, she had built competence in silence, layer by invisible layer, until the moment came when excellence was the only thing standing between survival and collapse. She had proven importance where no one thought to look, in the dismissed position on the forgotten flank during a blizzard that everyone assumed would hide nothing but empty terrain. The enemy had learned. Command had learned. The entire unit had learned. Sometimes the quietest soldiers carry the loudest legacies. True excellence doesn't announce itself with fanfare or demand attention with noise. It simply appears when the world needs it most, emerging from the places no one thought to look, carried by people no one thought to see. Sara Vance had been invisible by choice, overlooked by others, and underestimated by nearly everyone. But when the storm came and the attack materialized and the line began to break, she had been exactly where she needed to be, doing exactly what needed to be done. 420 meters through a blizzard. One shot. One soldier. One truth. The work speaks. And those who listen learn that the most dangerous thing on any battlefield isn't the loudest weapon or the most visible position. It's the quiet professional nobody remembered to fear. Sara Vance returned to OP7 every day after that battle. Not because she had to. She could have taken the scout platoon transfer, could have moved to a position with more visibility and prestige. But she understood something most soldiers never learn. Importance isn't given by others. It's built in darkness, refined through invisible work, and proven in storms when everything else falls apart. The Bronze Star arrived 6 weeks later in a small presentation ceremony. Captain Reeves pinned it to her uniform while the company stood in formation. She saluted, shook his hand, and walked back to her position in formation with the same quiet demeanor she'd always carried. That evening, she mounted the medal in her footlocker, under her bunk, where nobody could see it unless they were looking for it specifically. Because the medal wasn't the point. The recognition wasn't the point. The work was the point. The work had always been the point. Excellence doesn't need an audience. Competence doesn't require applause. And the soldiers who understand this, who do the hard things in the forgotten places with no guarantee anyone will ever notice, are the ones who hold the line when it matters most. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more hidden sniper stories. These stories keep the courage alive for generations to come. Hit that bell so you never miss the soldiers who changed everything from the positions everyone forgot, the battles no one expected, and the moments that proved quiet strength can be louder than any shout. Drop a comment. Have you ever been underestimated? What did you do about it? How did you prove them wrong? Not with words, but with work. Sara Vance would want to know. And so would we.